Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. Follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. I'm joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice. Follow him on the Twitter at Fitz_FF on the Twitter machine. And Matt Waldman is here with us at Matt Waldman to talk about some of this rookie class. But sorry I wasn't here last week, everyone. Pat had to, fill in the hosting chair and do all the stuff there. He threatened to never have me back because he had such a good time without me. But I am back here ready to talk some football. Fitz, how did it go without me? And I know you really did miss me, so I'm not even going to ask you that question.
I don't know how we persevered without you, Boggs, but we made it through somehow, and it went pretty well. But, we are on to next week, and really happy to have Matt here because I know the NFL draft is bearing down on us when Matt comes to pay us a call.
And this is Matt Waldman's jam. At Matt Waldman, like we said before, go to mattwaldman.com to check out his rookie scouting profile. He's been doing that for, I feel like, almost 20 years now, right, Matt? I mean, it's been a long time you've been putting this thing together, and I'm excited to talk about this. 18 of them already, man. Yep. So the rookie scouting profile is graduating high school already. I mean, it's 18 years old. It's ready to rock and roll.
Yeah,
so
pretty much registering with Selective Service, I guess, as we speak.
That's right. So, tell us a little bit about the profile and, tell everyone where they can get it, of course.
Sure. The RSP Rookie Scouting Portfolio is available at mattwaldman.com. It is one of the two most purchased draft guides that are independent draft guides according by evaluators in the NFL, personnel like scouts and personnel people, according to folks like Alex Brown, who's the director of recruiting at SMU, who's worked with Tom Herman at Houston, and then was at the head of recruiting at Rice. So he meets with these types of scouts on a regular basis. Now it's just devoted to quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, but I do at least 150 prospects. I go through my entire process, and my process is based on the best practices that I learned from a different industry to really take subjective data that you find from film and try and objectify it as much as possible, really clearly define what it is that I'm looking at. For instance, my wide receiver checklist is literally 98 defined points of detail of what I'm looking at. And then I use another grading format to actually the 98 points is like what they can do. Then I look at how well they do it and base a grade ranking on that. I take you through my process so it's transparent, try to do it in a really entertaining way so that you can see how these players relate to one another on different skill sets. You get cheat sheets so that you can just get like the short version and say, I just want to know where I should draft these guys. I have all that too. I do a post-draft along with it a week after the draft that gives you kind of like a tiered ranking across all positions of over 200 prospects after the draft, about 6 to 7 days after the draft. Usually come out with a preliminary cheat sheet first within the first 3 days, just so if people are drafting pretty quickly after the draft that they can have something from me. I look at fits, I look at depth chart information. Even on the cheat sheet, I'll show you things like if I love saying, Patrick Mahomes better than, Baker Mayfield, but you could get Patrick Mahomes in the second round based on ADP. I show you the ADP data that I've tracked during early drafts, and then show you the sweet spot of where you can get the best value for these players, or where you have to get them, even if I think they're a little overvalued. So you get all that for $21.95, mattwaldman.com, plus a newsletter. It's a great deal. Most people, when I say they're pleasantly shocked, you're going to hear it from me, and it sounds like a sales pitch, but you can go to Twitter and see me retweeting people who are just like, I had no idea. I had high expectations. I had no idea. And that's why I'm still here.
I love going back to not only after they're drafted and going back and looking at the profiles and stuff, but I like going back a couple of years and looking at them after they've been drafted and like, man, Waldman was crushing it. I mean, Skylar Thompson last year, we were talking about him on this show. He ends up starting a bunch of games for Miami because of Tua's concussion issues. And we had the full breakdown here with Matt. So I suggest you guys go check it out. It's an awesome resource. And this is a fantasy football guy too. Come on. We're talking to a guy that has worked at Football Guys before. He's been in the fantasy industry for over 20 years. This is exactly what we want. So thank you for sharing your time. And Matt, are you one of those psychos that likes to draft immediately? Do your rookie draft immediately after the draft, or do you like to wait a little bit?
I'm in leagues with those types of psychos. That's how I started. So we're like full IDP, 50-man rosters, big practice squad. Those are most of the leagues I play in.
I mean, I like the psycho rosters. I don't like the psycho drafting immediately after the draft. I like to wait a little bit. Let's just see how these guys are fitting in. Let's get some quotes from the coaches. Let's get some of that stuff. I want to have all the information I have. So,
no, man, I jump off the cliff, baby. That's the way we go.
We're going right in. We're going in. Yeah. Speaking of going in, we are going to talk QBs first, but before we do, I got to tell you guys to subscribe to Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and comment below this video, because when you do, you could win a free FREE upgrade to Fantasy Pros Premium. Whether you're looking for custom mock drafts, salary cap tools, or in-depth analysis of your fantasy performance, Fantasy Pros Premium has the tools to help you win. Unlock the most powerful tools in the industry. Don't want to wait for the giveaway? Sign up today at fantasypros.com/premium and start playing smarter, not harder. I also got to say, Ryan C. won this giveaway last month. Congrats, Ryan. Please get in touch with our customer support agents at mailbag@fantasypros.com with proof of your subscription to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and your current fantasypros.com username, and we will get that upgrade processed for you as soon as possible. Again, the winner is Ryan C. Congrats. So let's dive in, Matt, and let's talk about these QBs. And my first question, and however you want to answer this, and this is the ultimate question with Bryce Young: do the talents for him at the QB position outweigh the size concerns that we've seen from another Alabama QB in Tua Tagovailoa? Obviously, different players. I feel like Bryce Young is better at escaping pressure. He's a very, very good quarterback. I would say, he's the best going into the NFL right now. I don't think he has the highest ceiling or anything, but he's definitely the best going into the NFL. But he's small of stature, and these guys get hurt, and players get bigger, stronger, faster every single year. So does his talent outweigh his size concerns?
No, because we can go back to Franz Tarkenton. We can go back to Joe Montana, who looked like he had baby arms for legs throughout his career. Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. And really, if you look at Kyler Murray and look at really how bad of a manager he is in the pocket, he's mobile as all get out. He can stretch plays for 8 seconds. That's great. But he also forces his receivers to reroute, and he can't get rid of the ball quickly after he moves, because the way he moves is way too dynamic for the situation. Well, Bryce Young isn't that way. Bryce Young is basically Kyler Murray as an elusive player within the pocket or just outside the pocket, maybe not on the run, but with more control, with more ability to identify receivers and get the ball out quicker. So I'm not really worried about that. To me, it's more about fit. Now, if you put him with a team that isn't enthusiastic about using him and doesn't really employ a spread-oriented system, doesn't want to really maximize what he does best, which is what you want to do with every quarterback that you have that you're going to take in the first round, then yeah, that's an issue. But I find that players who, yes, the punishment factor is always going to be a concern, but at the same time, if you're good at making people miss and you don't have a lot of surface area to hit, that actually can be kind of a positive for you too. And we don't, people worry about throwing over the line of scrimmage. We want to remind people every year it's throwing between the blockers and the space between the trenches at the line of scrimmage, not over. So I think he'll be fine.
Matt, it seems like you're very enthusiastic about Anthony Richardson. I know you hate rankings because of the lack of nuance that they have, but you do overall positional rankings, and you've got Richardson as your number one quarterback. Can you maybe talk about some of the misconceptions with him? Because I think a lot of people are under the impression that he is all tools and no toolbox, but you make the case that he's definitely not technically and conceptually unskilled, and that he's actually a wizard on the whiteboard.
Yeah, That's for sure. So we'll put it this way. If you want to see the complete breakdown, you can get it for free at footballguys.com. You can go there and you can look up Matt Waldman in the search bar, and you'll see my full scouting report as well as my thoughts on this. But I'll summarize it this way, is that Anthony Richardson's skills in the pocket, the way that he moves with efficiency and control, the way he anticipates and avoids pressure, the way that he manipulates defenders in the middle of the field and in the flats, not the deep safety that a high school player does and that every analyst talks about like it's an important thing, but it's like a baseline thing. The bigger things are being able to manipulate multiple defenders in spaces underneath the safeties. And he does that extraordinarily well while he's moving in the pocket, avoiding pressure, and then being able to layer the throw in the intermediate range of the field. What I just described to you are things that a lot of players get highlighted for on ESPN for, one of those things, but not all those things together, and often struggle trying to integrate those things together. The thing with Anthony Richardson is that he has some footwork issues that are off, that some of his passes are inaccurate, but if you look at the studies that are being done by people who actually track information like myself, or there's some other folks that I've tweeted about in the article that show that in some of their databases, the only guy who had more drop passes, of catchable passes, in their database was Dan Marino than Anthony Richardson. So, and that his ability to avoid sacks, the only guy who was better was Phillip Rivers, who, as we know, is not a great mover. He was he was efficient and knew how to move in the pocket. So then now that we finally talk about Anthony Richardson, say, oh yeah, he's a near perfect athlete. When we talk about what they look at for RAS score, relative athletic score, scored a 10 out of 10.
Highest QB
ever. And he runs with a stamina of speed. Like Marshawn Lynch never ran with high speed. He ran with a speed that he maintained throughout the entire run, whether he was getting hit, carrying people, or spinning off folks. And you see some of his greatest runs are just that he maintained the same speed no matter what he encountered throughout the entire run. Anthony Richardson has that skill, in addition to the fact that he doesn't have to use it like Kyler Murray feels like he has to use it every time he's in the pocket. I'm banging on Kyler Murray a fair bit. He's a good quarterback, but I'm just trying to highlight the difference. I'll put it to you this way in a short way. Let's say that Scott is Anthony Richardson, and Pat, you're like the Mitchell Trubisky, Drew Lock. Sorry to insult you, but the quarterbacks that everybody wants in the first round because they fit all the Bill Parcells guidelines from 40 years ago. That was good for a defensive-oriented coach, but we didn't have the analytics to really look at things the way we can now, and maybe don't look at film at the level we should. Well, that's safe for Parcells. It's safe for GM speak. But say you guys are those players, but instead of being football players, you're learning how to speak Vietnamese. Okay, and you're going to go to Vietnam, and you're going to have all these, language lessons. And Scott's not going first. You're going first, Pat, because you're that you've been a 2-3 year starter. You've been learning for 2 to 3 years how to play, how to speak the language. You go over there. You've got a guide. You've got an app on your phone. They lead you. They make sure you stay out of all the dangerous neighborhoods. They make sure that you stay out of, not getting ripped off. You get this nice experience, and you learn the language. You get better at it. But 2 years later, you're still like holding up the app. You're still like the best thing you do is, where's the bathroom, and can you say that slower, please? Where that's where you're at. And where Scott, he's Anthony Richardson. He didn't get to go there for 2 years. He doesn't have the app. He doesn't have a guide. He shows up. It's like 6 months into he's been there for 6 months. The first couple of weeks, he got taken by street vendors. He got robbed. He had some embarrassing moments. Okay. But the difference is that he speaks at the speed of a native speaker. He listens at the speed of a native speaker. He senses emotion and can convey emotion. And the guy who ripped him off, the second time the guy tried to rip him off, he caught him on that, because it wasn't because he didn't understand the language and didn't understand emotion, is that he didn't recognize, like the equivalent of not recognizing cover 2. He didn't recognize the difference between a scam in Vietnam and the one that he grew up seeing wherever he was from in Miami Gardens. Okay. It was just a different kind of scam because the culture's different. He just
Man.
didn't see it enough. So you end up making friends with the con artist. He shows you all the places of where you should go, shouldn't go, that you're going to get more out of it. You're going to actually make more friends. You actually get to know native folks who are like family, and you have more bonds. So Anthony Richardson, to me, is a more intrinsically talented player who integrates information better, does it faster, just doesn't have as much experience doing it. So when people scream that he throws the pick six on cover 2, or that he tries to make the Matthew Stafford heroic throw with the defensive tackle in his chest while he's on the move late in the game, or that his receivers drop a number of passes that are catchable, they're missing that he's putting the ball exactly where it needs to be in many places, layering throws like Justin Herbert, moving in the pocket like a seasoned pro, and that he's closer to he's going to be like Josh Allen in the sense that Josh Allen may need a little bit of time for him to fix the footwork a little bit to be a little more accurate, but he's going to be closer to a Ben Roethlisberger, Josh Allen, Steve McNair type of player, which means that he could be a future MVP.
I see McNair never had to practice. I feel like that dude never practiced, and he was always out there, and you're like, oh, here he goes, game-winning drive again. It just seems like that. And by the way, 20 years leads Matt to the perfect analogy. So 20 years of experience. That is outstanding. That was a great analogy. Let me ask you, just in terms of fantasy, is there any landing scenario Anthony Richardson slips where you put CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, any of these guys that you have ranked in the similar range, in the same tier, ahead of him in terms of dynasty value?
Absolutely Las Vegas, because Josh McDaniels has a very bad reputation as a quarterback or a quarterback coach or a coach, because as I heard this long story that I won't get into in great detail, but the former GM for the Broncos during that era that they brought on Jay Cutler, and they brought on Josh McDaniels later after that. I can tell you, because I was on the show with Brandon Thorne when he was the producer and I was the guest. He told the story about how Josh McDaniels ripped Jay Cutler after his Pro Bowl season. First conversation, not hi, nice to meet you. Just like he went full Vince Lombardi before Frank Gifford and company. He had to tell Vince Lombardi that you're a young kid, you need to shut up, sit down, and we know you're smart, just learn and try and be a people person a little bit more before Lombardi became great. And Josh McDaniels went New York Giants Vince Lombardi on him, and Cutler turned to his agent and said, "Get me out of here." Yeah. That was the story. So McDaniels has a lot to prove as a developer, and because of the offense that he has, it's much more about throwing short. It's much more about giving them a lot of information for the defense to look at right away, but it's more from the pocket. And while Richardson can eventually do that, if he had a better coach in terms of a personality who's proven, I would be okay with that. But Tom Brady could tell Josh McDaniels to sit down and shut up and stop being a bleepity bleep, probably and get away with it. There are not a lot of young quarterbacks who could. So I would say that would be the worst case scenario for him.
Now, Matt, in the rookie scouting portfolio, you acknowledge the impressive tools that Will Levis has, but you leave the distinct impression that you think Levis would be an extremely risky selection if he were a top 10 pick. What are your biggest concerns?
You're such a gentleman about this. I love it. But here's the deal. I mean, if you get him in a situation where he can be like Jordan Love and have 2 to 3 years to sit on the bench, maybe 3 to 4, and he really works at his craft, maybe there's a chance that can get better, because like you said, he's the toolsy guy in this draft, even if it's not like the greatest tools you've ever seen. But the problem with him is that he's about 2 to 3 beats late with processing the field. And we're starting to learn that the closer you are in the middle of the field, starting at the snap, before the snap, the more you have to process information at a high speed. And for quarterback, that means that when you see leverage that's advantageous for your receiver, whether he looks open or not, you have to understand that it's open, and you have to get the ball out like that. It's got to be like the comedian hitting their mark and telling a good joke. Because you can have the greatest jokes in the world, and if you don't have timing, the joke's going to fall flat. And that's what happened with Alex Smith was one of the worst comedians that we've ever seen at the quarterback position. Patrick Mahomes is funny as all get out. He's the Richard Pryor of quarterbacks at this point. So, when we look at Levis, he's 2 to 3 beats late. And then when you look at his feet, he's got footwork issues that drive accuracy. You want the midline of your back foot pointing where the target's going to be. Midline of his back foot is pointing where the target actually is, not where it's going to be. He has the front toe for that refined accuracy, needs to be pointed at where the target's going to be too. His toe's way out to the left side or to the opposite side of the field of where he's going. And then he tries to fix these two positions of his feet as he's releasing the ball. Doesn't work that way. And the fact that he's had a quarterback coach and Rich Scangarello, who's been in the NFL for years, though he's had a series of one-year jobs, which makes you wonder, how effective that's been, how, in terms of how easy it is to work with, whatever. And he hasn't fixed that yet. He hadn't fixed that year two, hasn't worked on it. Those are two things that are going to take some time to do. And when you put all that together, it's hard for me to be confident that he is an NFL caliber quarterback right now. And really, to me, if I were grading him, I think he's a third string caliber quarterback at best.
Now you're also not crazy about some of the things that you've seen from Hendon Hooker. He's showing up in the first round of some mock drafts, and you have recommended that dynasty managers monitor him from afar unless they're able to stash him away on either IR or a taxi squad. What are your worries with Hooker?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel much better about Hooker than Will Levis, to be honest. Hooker, I think, has NFL caliber skills and that he can be a backup this year if he were healthy. Next year, he'll be able to be, I think, a number 3, then and a number 2, maybe if you really want to push it. And that eventually he might become a journeyman if everything comes together. My concerns is that even the things he does well, he can be a beat or two late with processing, like downfield throws. He plays in an offense that is maybe 4 to 6 years away from actually trickling down to the NFL. In the standpoint of that everything's spread out wide, the field spread out extremely wide. And, him reading the field hasn't been great. He's like Robert Griffin in the sense that he's athletic, but he's not real mobile or maneuverable or flexible as a mover. So, I like the skills to build on. I don't love the skills as a first-round player. I think that's the one that's a little absurd to me.
We're going to move on to running backs here, but before we do, let me tell you guys about our 2023 Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty with expert rankings, trade advice, combine coverage, Dynasty rookie profiles, position primers, and more. You'll have everything you need to dominate your draft for free. FREE. Upgrading to premium unlocks even more draft strategy content in our draft kit, along with the access to our Discord, which allows you to directly interact with our analysts. Unlock the secrets to crushing your Dynasty draft with our Dynasty Draft Kit today at fantasypros.com/dynasty. Now, Matt, I've been talking about Bijan Robinson for a couple seasons here because, as you can see in the background here, I am a Texas fan, huge Bijan fan. I'm actually buddies with his uncle. Is this guy the next LaDainian Tomlinson? I mean, I'm hyperbolic about Longhorns, of course,
sure,
but this is one of the best running backs I've ever seen coming into the draft. Saquon was up there as well. I love this dude. Super hard worker as well, as you pointed out in your RSP. So I am so excited about him. Do you match my level of intensity and excitement about Bijan Robinson?
I probably never could, but I can say, but I can appreciate it, and I definitely appreciate Bijan Robinson. He is certainly in that tier of guys like Chubb and Barkley and Todd Gurley and guys that we've seen along those lines. He can be a difference maker. And my comparison for him was two players that if you put them together, you might get LT, Frank Gore and Reggie Bush. If you kind of took the combination of both those players, that might actually equal LaDainian Tomlinson. I don't think he's quite as I think he's agile as LT. I don't think he puts it quite together as intelligently as LT does, or when LT did. you're also probably not going to see him in a Marty Schottenheimer offense that pounds the rock at the level that maximizes what LT could do. But at the same time, he's an excellent receiver. He has gotten better. Like, there were some things I saw in 2021 that kind of thought, well, he's more like the worst of Barkley as a decision maker in some regards, and he's shored that up. Part of that is learning how to hug blocks at the line of scrimmage so that when you're making a cut back, you stay tight to your block, and then the pursuit coming down the line can't reach you. Or if they do reach you, it's not getting a body on you, it's getting a hand on you so that you can run through them. But, size, speed, strength, receiving ability, decent blocker who's going to get better. There's no reason that you don't consider him the top player in the draft class, especially with early on how teams are going to try to use him. He should be a fantasy producer from the jump.
So everyone's got Bijan as the number one with a bullet, and then it seems like everyone's got Jahmyr Gibbs sort of as this tier unto himself, then the rest of the pack after that. Do you see it that way also? And do you think, if you do, is Gibbs closer to Bijan or is he closer to the pack?
I would almost, I kind of have it. I've got like 6 players that I think all belong, or 5 to 6 players that I think all belong in the same tier. Bijan's obviously at the top of that tier, but Gibbs to me is fit based to depend on whether he's closer to that pack or closer to Bijan in terms of how that's expressed for fantasy or for, just production value. Gibbs took me a while to come around on, to be honest. I saw him more early on in his career as maybe, and I loved Justin Jackson as a talent. He just couldn't stay healthy. And then he got basically beaten out by Austin Eckler because he couldn't stay healthy. He was looking good early on. What might have happened if the team was sold on him early? Could have he had gotten more shots? And that's an interesting question of what if for someone like myself. Maybe fantasy players go, it's just Austin Eckler. He's great, But that said, I kind of thought Gibbs was more of a slightly better Justin Jackson. But now that I've looked at his game a lot more, I would say he's kind of his aspirational player is Marshall Faulk, really quick-footed. Excellent pass catcher. Has to get better as a receiver. He can make certain types of plays in zone that are good, but he's not that guy that Alabama constantly split out and used the way that you would think. They actually took him out of a lot of plays on passing downs that you would think he would stay in conceptually. So he's gonna, I see the Kamara comparisons. And from a quickness, ability to squeeze through a tight crease, the speed, the hands, that's there. That's great. The difference is that Alvin Kamara is like a Zen master of contact balance that I have never seen before. And I mean, I still have Saints fans who love my Twitter page because I've shown stuff on Twitter about a video of some of the there's a play against Carolina where he literally I still don't understand how he got hit and knocked backwards and came back right up like kind of one of those kiddie punching bags that have the round bottom or a blocking tool. He came right back up and was able to do that. I still don't know how he did that. And Gibbs isn't remotely like that. So good player. I agree he's the number 2 guy, but I think there's 3 to 4 guys who could be mentioned in the Robinson Gibbs tier when it's all said and done.
I know one of those guys, Matt, is Tyjae Spears. And Spears obviously, rose up a lot of boards just based on what he did in the Rose Bowl against USC, which was an amazing performance. And I suggest anyone that hasn't seen Tyjae Spears, go back and watch that game if you want to just fall in love with a running back. He was unbelievable in that game. And speaking of Texas, one of the comps that you have on him is Jamal Charles. And I love it because this is another speedy back. Tell me about that comp, please.
Yes. Well, I haven't comped anybody to Jamal Charles in a while, I don't think. And anybody who I think when you look at Charles, the thing was awesome about him is in addition to the speed and the agility that Spears has the agility. He has the quickness. It's totally there. Is the control of the footwork to when you have to take a sideline approach on a perimeter run where you're taking the runway towards the boundary and then you have to cut downhill. You want to see backs do that as efficiently as possible. And for me, it's like, if you're making that cut between the tackles, you can do that you should be able to do that with one step. If you're working to the near side of the field, 1 to 2 steps. When the far side of the field, maybe 2 to 3 is acceptable if you just want to be a committee back, a guy who's like capable of being on the field. But when you're a guy like Spears who can do all of those with no gather step needed, you can just immediately just plant your foot and you're downhill and do it after you've been running at a good clip, a good pace. That's special. And he has that special. In the USC game, like you mentioned, you don't see many guys who have the cojones to say at running back to work into the middle of the crease and give a leg and take it away on a middle linebacker in the middle of a tight space and get away with it. Now, will he get away with that in the NFL? Probably not. But like Jamaal Charles, who I always equated to as that kid who was failing algebra because he was in his basement late at night doing physics projects that would be along somewhere in Caltech.
Right.
And then Todd Haley said, look, man, I know you possibly can do this stuff, but you got to figure out how to mature a little bit and figure out what's within your wheelhouse against these top athletes. And once he did, he was still ultra creative and special. And of course, he also had the cojones to tell Texas people when Adrian Peterson jilted them, I'm going to make you forget about Adrian Peterson. Well, I don't believe he did. I always remembered that. And when I watched his game, I said, well, he came as close as anybody possibly could. That kid's a special guy if he can learn to tame it. And Spears is that guy. I would also recommend watch the Houston game and watch the Memphis game because he's a good receiver too. Like Charles, they matched him up outside in key situations like overtime, one-on-one with corners, and he could win there. So he's not a powerful guy, but like Jamaal Charles, what I learned the most from Jamaal Charles watching his game for running backs is that if you initiate the contact and you have the quickness to do it, you initiate the chain of events that happen next with that interaction. And therefore, if you're quicker, you can shock a defensive tackle with a quick strike and then spin off it or duck under it. And those types of things are what made Jamaal Charles special. I think Tyjae Spears may not be quite Jamaal Charles, but he's closer to it than I've seen.
When we had you on the show a year ago, Matt, you were telling us about your enthusiasm for an unheralded Tasmanian devil named Isiah Pacheco. And then lo and behold, 10 months later, he's moving the chains in the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs. Is there an Isiah Pacheco this year? Are there candidates to have that sort of impact from someone who maybe we're not aware of and winds up coming out of the ether to surprise everyone?
I'm going to give you two, and one is Tyon Evans out of Louisville, who was a transfer from Kentucky and from Tennessee, and before that, Hutchinson Community College. And he is a 5'9", 225-pound back with 4.5 speed. He's in that dimensions of Ray Rice, Travis Henry. He can run through you, run around you, run over you. He's got he can run both gap and zone schemes. He's a little better at one than the other. But, if they get the right fit or he develops just a little bit more, he's going to be versatile. He can catch the ball. He's got some real potential as a blocker. I just think that because he transferred a couple of times and he was a community college guy, that he's getting a little bit overlooked. The other guy that this is the second time I've only mentioned him. And last night was the first time when I reviewed film on him on a Bears related podcast, the TTNL network, Keeping It 100. Those guys are great. But is Christopher Brooks out of BYU, who was transferred from Cal, 6'1", 235. And he has great feet. Zach Zenner, the former Lion, I think is training him or representing him. I don't remember which, but he can catch. He has good feet. He is an old-fashioned pile-moving, powerful back with good feet who can make the first man miss either against penetration or in the hole. He's not going to do crazy jump cuts, but he can run lineback. He can run power. He can run counter. He can run zone, especially inside zone. And he reminds me at worst of guys like Gus Edwards and Samaje Perine. At best, middle ground, maybe Mike Anderson, the old Broncos back, and high end, he might be more James Conner than people realize. And I don't think he's going to get drafted, but when he's going to make a roster, I bet.
What about on the other side, Matt? Who are we overvaluing? And when I say we, I mean just the media, maybe the fantasy media in general. Who are we looking at going, oh, I like this guy, but you are a little lower on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, we could say Chris Rodriguez as a sleeper. People talk about him that way, but I think it's Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby, I wanted to like Tank Bigsby. Everyone I know, even scouts that I know, were kind of like, you're going to love Tank Bigsby when you watch him. I just know you are, because he's, you like those backs who break a lot of tackles and all that. But when I watched him, I wasn't as impressed. I thought that he gets frustrated very easily and tries to bounce things outside that he shouldn't when it needs to stay within the scope of the play. I think he has a lot of tools in terms of being able to use footwork combinations, but he doesn't know how to combine them all that well. And so there's some issues there. I think he's used a lot on certain types of plays that you're just not going to see maybe as much. Maybe you will now that they're simplifying the offenses to run more counter and gap. So maybe he'll work on some of that. He's improved his speed, but to me, he's more like a Bilal Powell type of back, who I think can be good enough to help you and be a fantasy asset as a bye week option, but I don't see him as a lead starter for an extended period of time.
Probably a touchdown dependent guy. So I understand. I understand the talk there, and I like Tank. So, but not as much as I like Tyjae. Let's go to the wide receivers. But before we do, by now, most of you probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to see what all the buzz in the dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it's complicated? It is not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online fantasy front office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free, FREE, in a mock. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. And Mr. Pat Fitzmaurice and I are going to be running a dynasty league on Reality Sports Online. We're going to be taking submissions. We're going to go to our Discord, which we do on Fantasy Pros every Friday at 5 Eastern. If you want to be in a league with Fitz and I, a dynasty league on Reality Sports, please come and check out our Discord and tell us you want in. We don't know how many submissions we're going to get, but if it's a lot, we're going to do a raffle. If it's, not as many, maybe you'll get in the league just by letting us know you want in it. So please come check out our Discord, 5 Eastern, Fantasy Pros Discord, where Pat and I will be talking dynasty to enter to possibly get a team in that league. Now, Mr. Waldman, let's move over to wide receivers, and Jaxson Smith-Njigba seems as if he might be the only lock to go in the first round. That is what we're hearing. I mean, I feel like anything that we're hearing right now about the draft from the media people, you can just crumple up, throw it in the trash. It is not real, but this is what we're hearing. And I know Jaxson Smith-Njigba is at the top of most people's boards. Is he, in fact, worth a first-round pick? And are there any other wide receivers that you find first-round worthy in this class?
I think from the standpoint of what Jaxson Smith-Njigba does well, and if you want a slot receiver who can give you a little bit of either what Julian Edelman and Greg Jennings gave you, or even what Cooper Kupp gave you to a degree, if you're that kind of team, wide zone team, where you spread the field a little bit more, and you have the slot receiver on the field at all times, then I think Smith-Njigba can be that guy who maximizes that production. In terms of receivers that could be first-round picks, well, if we're going to look traditionally from how GMs see it, GMs like those bullet points, those guardrails, so that they can kind of cover their assets when they explain to people why a guy fails. And part of that is they want guys with height, extreme speed, and that's something that really the next two guys on my list who I think are first round caliber players, Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, don't have. They don't have that height. They don't have that weight. But in the end, I think that they're going to be players who can be long-term values, maybe even wide receiver ones for their teams, especially Zay Flowers. Jordan Addison, I think, will be that kind of Devonta, a slightly better version of Devonta Smith. I know a lot of people love Devonta still, but I think some people are realizing now that Devonta's kind of that guy, in those classic movies where they have the bully and there's the kid who's standing in front of him with the bully behind him being the mouthpiece for the bully. I think AJ Brown's the bully and Devonta Smith is kind of the mouthpiece for the bully. And that's no slight at Devonta Smith. He's fantastic. But when you have the bully taking care of the primary corner who's going to cover you and bully you try to bully you back up the boundary and lose, that's not something Devonta Smith does well. And I have fears that maybe Jordan Addison might not quite kind of be more like Devonta Smith in that way. Cedric Tillman, I like him more than most. But would you draft Mike Williams in the first round? That's a big question. If you're looking at potential production and what he's been able to do, the answer might be that's a safe pick. I might go for that considering what we have as bust. But the way GMs look at it, probably not, because they're looking for the ultimate primary guy who can do everything.
All right.
I just have a quick follow-up on that, Pat. Who was a wide receiver in recent years that you loved going into the draft and he ended up in a spot where you're like, oh, God, I hate this for his skill set, his production under this coach, whatever it was. Do you have one of those recently?
Yeah. Hakeem Butler.
No.
Hakeem Butler. Yeah. I hated that he went to a team that basically you could tell they were mixed on what they wanted from him. And then he really didn't get, and he had drops. He certainly did. But you're watching him lighten it up in was it the XFL right now or the USFL? It's the XFL. He's lighting it up in the XFL. It doesn't mean that's going to translate to the NFL, but he's going to get another opportunity because you can see what's there. I mean, I just think that they wanted Andy Isabella. They ended up getting him too, but Andy Isabella wasn't good enough. He had things to work on. And Hakeem Butler, just like you just didn't really see what the opportunities were, and he got labeled. And I think that maybe he'll be able to reform his image, and we're going to see more from it.
Yeah, that was a tough one. He was the favorite wide receiver of some people in that class, and wound up being sliding down to day 3. So, that was disappointing. All right, Matt, I'm going to ask you for your rapid takes on 3 receivers who you maybe seem not wildly enthusiastic about. First of all, Quentin Johnston.
He is if he can fix his hands positions, he could be the top receiver in this class. Because he hasn't completely yet and he's working on it, but it's still a struggle with his game, and that what separates a primary starter from a guy who's more of a contributor in certain situations. He's at the top of my second tier as almost an immediate starter, but that's the thing that's in his way.
Yeah, you really get that point across in the RSP about how other people, that's just sort of a bullet under weaknesses for him. For you, it's like this could torpedo this guy's career if this doesn't get thick.
If it goes completely wrong, it could be Robert Meacham.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy with that size should not have a low contested catch rate. Josh Downs should not have a higher contested catch rate than Quentin Johnston with his enormous size. So I understand that too.
Good segue, Bogs, because the next guy on my list was Josh Downs.
Yeah, I think for me, this is, if I'm going to bet there's a guy I missed on, like easily, it would be Josh Downs. But I would probably have to go back and rewatch some things. Right now, I just see him as more of a good slot receiver, but a guy like Jamison Crowder, where everyone was excited about Jamison Crowder. I remember Mike Mayock saying he could be more than a slot receiver. He could be, an outside guy. He's a really sneaky good player. And I just think that he's kind of like the North Carolina version of Duke's Jamison Crowder.
Jalin Hyatt.
Speedy, love where you can fit him. He could be terrific for a team, but for a fantasy team, I think of Henry Ruggs early in his career. I think of Ted Ginn. I think of players who, did they have the contested catch skills? And I didn't see that on film. And I watched pretty much, I did watch every every play of his last year. And the one that I remember was a back shoulder fade where the defender was still a good yard off of him. I haven't seen any contested plays, and maybe he can do it, but until he proves it, I can't give him the grade.
Harder to run by guys in the NFL than it is at the college level. Now, Matt, one guy a lot of people are super down on is Kayshon Boutte after his poor combine results, but your scouting report on him has a pretty optimistic tone, and you had some interesting comps for him. So which NFL receivers do you see as the closest comparisons?
Yeah, when you look at Kayshon Boutte, I mean, the fun thing about him is, he's 5'11", 195. He ran a 4.5 40, 4.2 520, and everybody got down on his 29-inch vertical leap because receivers are supposed to jump high. But, the similar profiles for those two guys are Robert Woods and Jarvis Landry, and he's quicker than both, and he's faster than Landry. But he can make the first man miss. Most of his play is on the ground. He's making people miss after the catch, one or two people almost consistently. He's good at being able to win the ball in the air. He's skilled as a route runner. He just got banged up. People expect him to be Jamar Chase, and nobody can be Jamar Chase or Jamar Charles. And he and on top of that, he's someone who because of those things and the combine, people went nuts about it. But it's the same thing with Dalvin Cook at the running back position. He had a low vertical, and people got down on him, and they didn't realize that his style of play was based on curvilinear movement, not on jump cuts, not on hard cuts. He never does that. He rarely makes these cuts. He's pivoting his feet almost to change his direction. It looks like two pistons, So you have to understand how to match the player style to the metrics, and the metrics match his playing style. I think he's going to be basically in that realm of Woods and Jarvis Landry, maybe a little better than Landry, not quite Woods. We'll see. Maybe he'll get to Woods level at his peak.
How much do you consider, because Kayshon Boutte is one of those guys that had a horrible attitude the last year. He was like, I hate that this is news, but it's news now. Like, he unfollows all of the LSU stuff on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, and then he refollows it, and you can see him take plays off, things like that. Just little nagging off-field things. His attitude at the combine didn't seem very great. This is probably not a dude that's going to interview very well. How much of that goes into your profiles and your consideration? Anything at all?
Nothing, because here's the quick and dirty about it is that even with teams that do this stuff, they get it wrong. Like think they literally, like I've heard story after story from scouts and guys who consult with teams on things, and teams don't understand that maybe they need to have like a psychologist, an industrial psychologist. Maybe they need to have somebody with a law enforcement background actually checking these things and doing it in a way, because a lot of teams, what happens is they assign them the scouts who are, 25 to 35 years old, the bulk of them, who this is their only job. They've never really interviewed people before. They've been told what to interview, but then they're also told to editorialize or to make decisions based on what they heard. So if Pat goes into a bar, goes to a school, and the guy says, and the recruiting coordinator says, yeah, he's partying all the time, and I'm going to pick on Pat today because I just love Pat. Is that like I'm going to pick on him? Is that he just goes back to the team and says, this guy's a partier, take him off our boards, and they go, okay, you go to the school. Or I'm going to be nicer to you, Scott. So it'll be me. I go to the school, and I at least go to the bar that I was told that he goes to. And I asked him, you see this guy? He goes, yeah, he shows up 3 times a week. And then I go, well, see, there you go. That's confirmation. And then you show up, and you're the only wise one of the 3 of us, because you ask him, how long does he stay? About an hour and a half. What time does he come here? About 7:30. What does he drink anything? Nope. Brings a bottle of water every time. Same 3 friends, talks to some people, leaves, never had a problem. Good tipper, nice guy. Wildly different ideas of what that is. And also you have to understand that maturity is a factor too. Fred Taylor, I can tell this story now, needed a bodyguard, to an off-duty police officer, to actually take him. I think he probably told this story by now on those players' things that he's doing. But I heard this 10 years ago, and I did an RSP. I kind of made a slightly based on reality version of this 10 years ago in one of my site articles about how you would handle a situation like this. He still thought he was at the University of Florida partying when he was in Jacksonville. He nearly missed a flight. You don't miss a team flight as a player. So they put a retired police officer to carry his keys around and follow him from wherever he went. He was just a partier. He wasn't a bad guy. But to do that and make sure that he got to the airport on time, no matter what condition he was in. That's
way different than unfollowing people on Twitter. Yeah. So yes. Obviously there are levels and layers to every person.
I'm not making excuses for Kayshon Boutte, but I do think he's like one of the youngest wide receivers in this class too. I don't think he's turned 21 yet.
Yeah. And imagine being told you're the next Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, you know, those guys, and you think that's going to happen, and the program goes
right,
you know, and they're blaming you.
You have a 308-yard game as a freshman, and everyone thinks you think you're king of the world. I'm sure.
Let's go to tight ends to end this out here, Matt, and let's just start at the top, or the perceived top of this class, with Dalton Kincaid. He's your number one tight end. He has drawn Travis Kelce comparisons. A lot of people, I mean, this is the thing you hear from a lot of people. Is that fair? And is it really fair to compare anyone to Travis Kelce because he's probably the best tight end that ever play?
Not completely, but fair. But it's fair enough to compare him as a receiver. He has the ability to go above the rim like Kelce, great hand-eye coordination, great skill in tight coverage. After the catch, I would even compare him to an extent because he actually makes the first man miss consistently, if not the second or third man. He's very good at being able to break tackles. He generally either breaks a tackle or makes a first man miss, and you don't see that from a lot of tight ends. So that's all there. Now, as a blocker, no chance. Can't compare him to Kelce, even though people say he's not a great blocker. He could have been a great blocker. They didn't want to use him that way because they don't want to wear him down. They want to leverage him as a receiver. Kincaid is more of a lead blocker. He's more of a guy that you use on winebacks or on pulling blocks, on counter, or use him as a stock blocker. And that's enough. If a team realizes that's what he's going to be and they use him in a spread offense like Kelce, he can be that guy.
Now, the rest of this tight end group is deep, especially for fantasy. Michael Mayer seems the most pro-ready out of this group in terms of being able to catch the ball and block. Musgrave, Laporta, Kraft, all seem like great receiving options. Washington is a physical freak. Is there anyone from this group who, is maybe a tier or two lower for you? And is there anyone else that should be up in this group?
Sure. I think that I like Michael Mayer a lot. I think I would agree with the assessment that he is probably the most pro-ready guy because he's a good blocker and he's a proven zone receiver who can win man-to-man in tight coverage in short to early intermediate ranges of the field, meaning the red zone. Like he can be a one-on-one matchup in the red zone. But if you're looking toward, so to me, in many of these rookie classes that we've seen tight ends, he would have been top 1, 2, or 3 in the past 3 to 5 rookie classes that I've done. But this class has guys with more promise athletically because you're not going to match. I'm sorry, you're not going to match up Michael Mayer on the outside on the level that you do with Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski. I just don't think he has that. I know that some people say that, well, they used him differently, but I've watched him multiple years. Right. I just didn't see that level of athletic ability.
Is he closer to Dalton Schultz or closer to like Gronk and those guys?
To me, if the comparison I think that I have for him real quick, let's see. The comp that I had for him is more like Hunter Henry. When Hunter Henry was, is really with a good weapon at quarterback. Pat Freiermuth, Austin Hooper, that's the low end Austin Hooper. Hunter Henry at his best is more of where I think he'll be. And Pat Freiermuth, where Pat Freiermuth is going to be when his quarterback catches up, is where his aspirational upside is. But guys that I think that should be up there, Sam Laporta, because no team's going to pick Sam Laporta to be an inline blocker, but there's going to be plenty of teams that are going to use him out on the wing as a blocker, kind of like Kincaid, and he has terrific hands. He's someone who very good after the catch, really has a savvy of being able to get downfield well. He runs good routes. He's more of a receiver as a route runner in a lot of respects. And then I would add Luke Schoonmaker out of Michigan. he's a top athlete, but he's used a lot in line because he's the best blocker in this class, if you ask me. And the fact that you didn't see him get a lot of matchups, I do like the bend. I do like the quickness. I think that he may not be a matchup guy that Gronkowski was, but I think he could be one of the better all-around tight ends in this group.
I think that's everything. Unless Fitz, do you have any more, questions for Waldman before we send him off to the next podcast? I'm sure he's booked up from now till the draft.
Yeah, we know Matt has media appearances stacked up this time of year, so I think we can let him go on that. We hit all the major positions, and I think all the major guys we wanted to ask him about. So, but man, I would definitely recommend checking out the RSP. Go get that thing. I was telling Matt, I sat there on my couch on Saturday night, real exciting life, at 9:00 or whatever with the dog asleep at my feet, just, plowing through the RSP. And, I love this stuff like the anecdote about, Matt, what you thought was your misevaluation of Dak Prescott and how you kind of went back and self-audited your whole process just because you were curious about what you had missed there. And, that's just the dedication to your craft that you have. And it really shows in the RSP. And there's just, there's like a little bit of everything in there. Some great storytelling, obviously great scouting and evaluation, like so thorough with your process. Really impressive piece of work. And I urge people to go out and get it.
And the analogies are top notch, Mr. Waldman. I mean, unbelievable. I love these. But please remind everyone where they can find the RSP.
Yeah, you can find the RSP at mattwaldman.com. And I'll just add that I give to an organization called Darkness to Light, d2l.org. I've been doing that since 2012. And they're an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children through training programs, whether it's universities, government organizations, or individuals, civic groups. You can go to d2l.org to find more. I donate up to $5,000 each year now, and I've donated over $55,000 to them since 2012. We're probably going to make it get to over 60 this year.
That's awesome. Great guy. Great information. Please check it out if you can at Matt Waldman on Twitter as well, at Bogman Sports for myself, and at Fitz_FF for Fitzy. We will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.